Black Belt laughed at a shy little girl's stance. Seconds later, she silenced the whole room. When a shy, soft-spoken girl stepped onto the mat at a local martial arts showcase, no one paid her much attention, least of all the black belt instructor who couldn't hide his smirk. Her stance looked awkward. Her eyes stayed down. To the crowd, she was just another timid kid about to be embarrassed in public. But within moments, silence fell, and what followed would leave the entire room breathless. Because behind that quiet demeanor was a legacy forged in sacrifice, discipline, and something far deeper than technique. In less than 5 minutes, she wouldn't just stun the spectators. She would change how they viewed strength forever. And the man who mocked her? He'd never forget the day a little girl taught him to stand down. Just a quick pause before I forget. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. The gym smelled like pine-scented cleaner and sweat. The kind of sweat that clung to the walls, like ghosts of battles past. It was Saturday morning at Riker's dojo, a place where ambition often spoke louder than discipline, and where new students learned that not every black belt earned respect the right way. In the far corner, sitting cross-legged on the blue mats, was a girl no older than 10. Her GI was crisp, untouched by the friction of sparring. Her small fingers gripped its sleeves nervously, folding them and unfolding them again. No one knew her name yet. She hadn't spoken much since she arrived. Her mother stood at the entrance, arms folded, jaw clenched, not with worry, but with restraint. A woman who knew how to stay still in a world that never stopped watching. She carried a worn duffel bag with an old patch stitched into the side. Most didn't notice it. One man did. Master Colby Riker, a 5th-degree black belt and local legend, walked across the floor with the confidence of a man too used to applause. His students watched every step like it was scripture. But as he looked down at the girl, quiet, still, knees tucked, he tilted his head with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "You sure this is the right room, sweetheart?" he asked, chuckling. "We don't teach ballet here." A few of the teens laughed behind him. The girl didn't flinch. Her mother's voice cut the air, calm and clear. "She's here for the sparring round." Riker raised an eyebrow. "That's so." The girl stood. Slow. Precise. Like she'd been taught not to waste a single motion. She bowed, not to Riker, but to the mat itself, a gesture older than the man laughing at her. "Suit yourself," he said, still amused. "We've got a few minutes before real matches begin. Let's see what you've got." "You." He pointed to one of his older students, a cocky 15-year-old with fast hands and no patience. "Take it easy, all right? Don't scare her off." The room began to shift. Subtle, curious glances. Whispers. The girl stepped onto the mat, feet bare, eyes down. Her stance was unusual. Guard low, weight shifted. Not what Riker taught. Not what the others knew. That's when he laughed again, louder this time. "That's your stance." But her eyes didn't rise. Her hand adjusted a loose strap on her wrist. From her pocket, a small patch of fabric peeked out, a stitched insignia. Faded. Military. A trident barely visible. The room didn't notice. But her mother did. And she nodded. Then the bell rang. The boy facing her, tall, cocky, brimming with teenage arrogance, gave a casual bounce on his heels, like this was warm-up, not a match. He wasn't mean. Just thought he knew how this would go. After all, he'd sparred dozens of opponents. Some twice her size. This one looked like she'd cry if you raised your voice. The room watched with mild amusement. A few parents near the benches leaned in, hoping for entertainment. One instructor chuckled, "She'll learn." First fall always humbles. Master Riker didn't call the match officially. He didn't have to. This wasn't a real bout. It was mockery in disguise. "Go easy," he said again. The boy lunged. A simple, overconfident jab, just enough to provoke, to set the tone. But his hand sliced through air. The girl wasn't there. No flinch. No retreat. She'd pivoted. Subtle. Silent. Like water refusing to be split. The room blinked. The boy blinked harder. He came again, sharper this time. A kick, textbook style, fast enough to tag her torso. But again, she moved. Not with panic, but with patience. Timing. His foot missed by a breath. He stumbled. Now the murmurs grew. On the edge of the mat, her mother had not moved an inch. Arms still folded. Face unreadable. And for the first time, Master Riker's smirk twitched. Just barely. The boy adjusted, annoyed now. He moved in again, tighter. 3 fast strikes, all aimed to graze, to prove dominance without cruelty. She didn't block. She didn't strike. She repositioned. Effortless sidesteps. Knees bent just right. Hips aligned. Breathing measured. The kind of footwork Riker taught only at black belt level. And even then, most forgot it under pressure. And she hadn't thrown a single punch. Hit her, someone whispered from the back. He did. Or tried to. She spun, slid low, came up just to his left side. The moment his balance shifted forward, she tapped his shoulder with 2 fingers. Not a strike. A reminder. He froze. She could have taken him down. But didn't. Didn't need to. The silence came not after a blow, but after mercy. And that's when Riker noticed her eyes. She wasn't looking at the boy. She was watching the floor behind him, measuring distances, angles. Just like. His gaze flicked to the mother. The duffel bag. That old patch again. This time he read it. NSWC Devgru. He swallowed. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Wait. Stop the match. But it already had. Because the girl had bowed again. And the boy wasn't moving. Not out of fear. Out of respect. He just didn't know why yet. The boy stepped back, face flushed, but not from exertion. He wasn't humiliated, just confused. He'd felt something in that last moment. Not fear. Not even pain. Control. Someone in total control of him. She had moved like she'd been here before. Not in this dojo, but in combat. Not real combat. Of course, she was a child, but there was an echo in her movement. Echoes don't lie. She bowed once more, then walked backward off the mat, never turning her back. Just like she'd been taught. Riker cleared his throat. All right, reset. Let's get the next pair up. But no one moved. Not even his students. Even the benches were still. The girl returned to her mother's side and sat. Same posture. Same folded knees. Her mother placed the duffel at her feet, not touching her, not praising, just letting the silence settle. One of the parents finally asked, "Who is she?" The mother looked up. Eyes calm. Voice calm. "She's just here to learn." That answer should have ended it. But it didn't. Riker walked toward them, his tone now lacking its earlier bite. That stance, that pivot. That's not something you find in local dojos. The girl looked away, but the mother didn't blink. "You've trained before?" Riker asked. She finally nodded. "I taught her what I could." Riker tilted his head. "Taught her? You." The woman's boots shifted slightly as she stood. What Riker hadn't noticed, what no one noticed until now, was the subtle limp in her left leg. A careful weight distribution that suggested injury, but also training. Habitual, not recent. And her hands. Scarred knuckles, soft from time away, but still marked with calluses. "You serve?" he asked, this time respectfully. She didn't answer right away. Then, "I retired 10 years ago." He nodded, glancing down at the faded patch on the duffel. NSWC, Naval Special Warfare Command. There weren't many women in that community. Even fewer who made it out whole. His breath caught. "You were Devgru?" She didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. Just that calm, solid silence. And then came the quiet reveal. The girl opened the bag and pulled out a small, faded black belt. Not hers. Frayed at the ends. Well used. She began folding it carefully, just as she had the sleeves earlier. And Riker recognized something he hadn't in years. Ritual. Not performance. Not ego. Legacy. Passed down not in trophies, but in habits. In breath. In silence. The room had quieted into something fragile. Not reverence yet, but curiosity laced with doubt. The girl sat cross-legged again, folding the belt with delicate precision. It was clearly too large for her waist, and too worn to be new. Riker watched her fingers. She wasn't mimicking. She knew how it was supposed to be done. "Where'd she get that?" someone whispered. No one answered. The black belt, its threads faded to gray, tip frayed like sea rope, bore no stripes, no name, no markings. Just time. And sweat. And something else Riker recognized too late. Blood memory. He stepped closer. Not too close. His posture had shifted, subtly. Hands at his side now, not on his hips. Voice lower. "You trained under someone?" The mother's gaze drifted to the belt. Then to her daughter. Then to Riker. "I did." He waited, but she didn't elaborate. Of course not. People who actually served never did. Riker cleared his throat. "Devgru doesn't train families." A flicker of something, regret? Steel? Moved behind her eyes. "He trained us on his time off." He. She looked down. The girl, still silent, rested the folded belt atop her knees like a relic, as if it still belonged to him. Riker's voice softened. Was he her father? She nodded once. Gone 6 years. That answered everything and nothing. The silence lingered. Uncomfortable for some, sacred for others. The boy she had sparred with, still standing off to the side, arms crossed now, stepped closer. His voice, for once, was quiet. What was his name? The girl finally looked up. Just one word, careful and clear. Marcus. That name meant nothing to most. But Riker blinked, once. Then again, like memory just slapped him. Marcus Hayne? He asked, breath catching. The mother's silence was answer enough. Riker exhaled, half-whispered. They called him Spectre. Now even the teens in the back had stilled. Spectre was a name you heard in the background noise of military legends. Always spoken low, like thunder in the distance. The man who never missed a shot, who never spoke on mission, who trained without needing to. No one had ever confirmed his existence. And now here was his daughter, in a child-sized GI, folding his belt on a dojo floor filled with plastic trophies and borrowed pride. Not saying a word, because she didn't need to. You could feel the shift ripple across the room like a pressure change before a storm. The laughter was gone. So were the whispers. Even the sound of distant traffic beyond the thin gym windows felt muted now, as if the outside world knew to stay back. Spectre. The name didn't need a file. It carried its own classified air. And now that name rested gently on a 10-year-old girl's shoulders. She didn't seem burdened by it. Didn't look proud or scared. Just calm. Present. Riker stepped back, hands suddenly unsure what to do. His entire posture recalibrated. This wasn't a sparring warm-up anymore. This was something else. A reckoning, maybe. I trained with a guy who swore he'd seen Spectre shoot out a generator light from a moving chopper, Riker muttered under his breath. Didn't believe him. The mother glanced sideways, quietly. He hated helicopters. That quiet correction hung heavier than any boast. One of Riker's students, a 16-year-old with a blue belt and too many opinions, tried to shake it off. She didn't even hit him, he muttered, pointing at the girl. She just dodged. That's not fighting. Riker didn't answer. He just looked at him. But the girl did. She stood, walked back to the mat. Slowly, deliberately, like it mattered. The room parted as she passed. She looked at the boy she'd sparred with earlier and bowed. He hesitated, then bowed back. And with a simple pivot, she moved into position again. Ready stance. Still that odd posture. Not Riker's way. Not textbook. But now, no one laughed. Because suddenly, it didn't look odd anymore. It looked precise. The blue belt teen hesitated. Go on, Riker said. Spar with her. He stepped up reluctantly, a half-smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Not arrogance now, but uncertainty disguised as confidence. She didn't blink. This time, she moved first. One step forward. Weight low. And in that one step, everything changed. The shift of her hips. The pivot of her ankle. The way her elbow guarded her ribs while the other hand tracked air. Not just movement. Not just sparring. Tactics. Pattern breaking. It was exactly how her father used to move, Riker knew now. He'd never seen Marcus Hayne in person, but he'd watched the footage. The grainy, midnight green kind with no audio and no replay. You couldn't copy that kind of movement from watching. You had to live it, or be raised by it. The moment her foot touched the mat, the blue belt knew this wouldn't be like the drills. She didn't posture, didn't blink, didn't feed into the silent tension radiating off him like a wire about to snap. She just waited. No bravado, no bounce in place, no twitchy readiness that rookies confuse for focus. She was already centered. He tried to lead with a simple jab, just to test distance, a low-commitment strike. But by the time his foot shifted forward, she'd already circled past him. Not fast, not flashy, just gone. He turned, frustrated now, threw a right hook, more aggressive this time. Her arm moved, only just, and redirected it with the side of her wrist. It didn't hurt. It didn't stop him. But it reminded him he had no idea what she was doing. And worse, she did. Riker watched closely now, arms folded, lips tight. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The girl took no offensive stance. She simply existed in response. Always just outside his reach, always one breath ahead. It was defensive strategy at its purest, not evasion out of fear, but calculated refusal to be controlled. And Riker finally saw it. She wasn't trying to win. She was showing him that he couldn't. The blue belt lunged, frustrated now. A messy kick, more force than form. She dropped to one knee. One palm planted. Pivot. Turn. Slide. And just like that, she was behind him. The match should have been over. But she didn't take him down. Instead, she stood, slowly, and waited. A cold hush spread over the room. She was teaching him something, and he was finally learning it. He turned, slower now. Guard lowered. And for the first time, he bowed, not because he was told to, because he understood. She bowed back, and the match ended. No points scored, no contact made. But everyone in that room, from the skeptical students to the quiet mothers in the back, knew what had just happened. Not dominance. Presence. Not attack. Mastery. Riker turned to the mother, who hadn't moved. She doesn't fight to win, he said quietly. The woman nodded once. She fights to remember. No one applauded. Not because they didn't want to, but because clapping felt wrong. It would have shattered something sacred. The girl stepped off the mat in silence, returned to her corner, and sat back down exactly as before. Knees folded, hands resting in her lap. The black belt, her father's, still cradled gently beside her. Like nothing had happened. But everything had. Riker glanced around the room. Gone were the smirks. Gone were the half-whispered jokes. Even the older students sat straighter now. One of them quietly tightened his own belt. Not because it was loose, but because he realized he'd been wearing it carelessly. The blue belt she'd just sparred with walked past her on his way off the mat. He paused, then bowed, not just with form, but depth. She looked up at him and gave a small nod. Still no words. Still no smile. She didn't need either. Riker found himself walking toward her mother again, slower this time. There was no trace of the bravado he carried earlier, just curiosity now, and something else. Respect. I've run this dojo for 14 years, he said quietly. I've seen prodigies, national champions, even a few who made it through Phase 1 selections. But I've never seen that. The woman tilted her head slightly. Riker gestured toward the girl. She doesn't move like a student. She moves like she's remembering someone. The mother looked at her daughter, a softness rising in her eyes that hadn't shown itself all morning. She trains every morning, she said. Wakes up at 5, runs the drills he taught her, checks his notes, plays back the tapes. Not because I ask her to, because that's how she keeps him close. Riker's eyes dropped to the duffel bag, to the belt, to the girl's posture. It all made sense now. She's not trying to become him, he said, half to himself. She's carrying him. The mother nodded. And then, for the first time, the girl spoke. Her voice was gentle, dry, almost hesitant, like it hadn't been used in hours. I don't like hurting people. Riker turned toward her. She met his eyes, not with challenge, but clarity. My dad didn't either. He just had to be good at it. And in that moment, Riker felt something shift deeper than respect. Reckoning. A child who had inherited the weight of a ghost, and who bore it with perfect form. The girl's words echoed long after the sound had faded. I don't like hurting people. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't even a philosophy. It was a remembrance. A phrase inherited, like the belt, like the stance, like the ritual she followed in silence. Riker sat down slowly on the bench across from her, not looming, not instructing, just listening now. He saw the way her toes rested flat against the mat, heels slightly lifted, not because it was comfortable, but because it allowed for instant movement. Her breath was calm, measured. For seconds in, for seconds out. Combat breath work. She hadn't learned that here. You said she watches tapes? Riker asked the mother gently. She nodded. Old training footage. From overseas, mostly. He left some behind. Not everything, of course. Some things she wasn't meant to see. She figure out how to fight from those? No, the mother said. She figured out how he moved, then taught herself how to respond. Riker turned to the girl again. You don't strike first, he said. She shook her head once. Striking first means I don't understand enough yet. He blinked. Slowly. It wasn't something any child should say. Not naturally. Not rehearsed. That was warfighter logic. You analyze before you act. She looked down. Dad said fighting is like music. The first measure belongs to someone else. You listen to find the rhythm. Riker smiled just slightly. Now it all made sense. This wasn't talent. This wasn't genetic luck. This was the result of something far rarer. Inheritance of precision. She hadn't trained to defeat opponents. She'd trained to not dishonor the way he moved. And that kind of training didn't come from seminars. It came from love. He glanced at the black belt again. No rank stripe. No name stitched into the cloth. Just wear, time, and memory. I've got students who talk more in one match than you've said all day, Riker said quietly. The girl tilted her head, a question in her eyes. That's not a criticism, he added. It's an observation. Then, after a pause, do you want to keep training here? She looked to her mother. Her mother looked back. Then the girl nodded. Yes, she said simply. Then we'll train you, Riker replied. But I won't treat you like a beginner. I'll treat you like someone who already knows what they're doing and needs to be sharpened, not shaped. The girl nodded once. A pact was made. Not with ceremony, not with belts, but with recognition. The day had thinned out. Most students were gone now. The echoes of sparring faded beneath the low hum of the overhead fans. Dust motes drifted like memory through shafts of late afternoon light. But Riker stayed. So did the girl and her mother. He didn't ask them to leave. Some silences don't need permission to linger. The duffel bag still sat at the edge of the mat. Faded, weather-stained, the kind of military green that had been bleached by desert sun and monsoon rain. And stitched into its corner, that patch. NSWC DevGru. Most would have missed it. But Riker had seen one like it before, in a photo, years ago. The kind they only showed once at a memorial, then buried under silence and paperwork. He walked over to it, crouched slowly, respectfully. You don't see many of these. The mother watched him carefully. Riker nodded at the patch. These get removed when people retire. Unless they're carrying it for someone else. She said nothing, but the flicker in her eyes said enough. Riker gently touched the edge of the canvas. I lost a student to a training op in Jordan, he said. 8 years ago. Smartest kid I'd ever taught. But he froze during a breach. He looked up. I've seen fear paralyze. But your daughter, she moves like someone who's had fear explained to her before she ever had to feel it. The woman stepped forward now. She's never seen combat, but she's seen what it does. Marcus didn't hide anything. Riker nodded. That's rare. He wanted her to understand the why, not just the how. And just then, the girl stood, walked quietly to the bag. She knelt beside it, opened a side pocket, and pulled something out. Not a weapon, not a medal, a journal, worn leather, corners curled, a name barely visible on the cover. She opened it to a bookmark page, held it out to Riker without a word. He took it carefully. The handwriting was tight, neat, and undeniably military. Combat isn't about domination. It's about discipline. The most dangerous people in a room are the quietest, because they've already made peace with the moment. Riker blinked once, twice. Below the quote, in a younger hand, another sentence had been written, smaller, careful, in pencil. I want to be like him, but kinder. The girl looked up at him, unsure if she'd shared too much. But Riker's face had softened. There were no more doubts now. No tests needed. Only refinement. The dojo's fluorescent lights hummed softly, flickering occasionally as if the building itself held its breath. Shadows stretched long across the polished mats, where moments ago the room had held an intensity neither the students nor the parents had expected. Now, silence reigned, a silence heavy with respect and something closer to awe. Riker sat on the edge of the bench, the worn journal resting carefully on his knee like a relic. Each line of ink within it felt alive, a tether between past and present, memory and hope. He traced his finger over the handwritten words as if seeking the very spirit of the man who had written them. Beyond the glass doors, a few parents lingered, whispering in hushed tones. Their earlier smirks and scoffs had vanished, replaced by a profound silence. They had witnessed something rare, not a flashy victory or a loud declaration, but the quiet command of someone who carried an invisible weight with grace and humility. The boy with the blue belt stood nearby, arms crossed and jaw tight. The confidence that had once bordered on arrogance was now replaced by a deep, almost reverential humility. He avoided looking directly at the girl, as if acknowledging that she had entered a space none of them fully understood. Near her mother, the girl sat cross-legged, her small hands folded gently over the black belt she had brought with her, a symbol not of conquest, but of legacy. Occasionally, her eyes flicked toward the journal Riker held, as though drawing strength from the inked memories and unspoken lessons contained within. Suddenly, a soft cough broke the silence, drawing everyone's attention. At the doorway stood an older man, one Riker had not noticed before. His uniform was simple but impeccably maintained, and the quiet authority he carried was unmistakable. Lines of experience etched his face, and the calm certainty in his eyes spoke of decades spent in service. "Commander Mallory," Riker said, rising respectfully and extending his hand. Mallory nodded solemnly. "I heard about the demonstration." Riker gestured toward the girl and her mother. "She carries a legacy," he said quietly. Mallory's gaze softened, tinged with memory. "I knew Marcus. To most, a ghost. To a few, a guardian." The girl looked up, eyes meeting Mallory's for a fleeting moment, a silent exchange loaded with unspoken understanding. Mallory smiled gently. "You've done well." The mother's voice was steady and filled with quiet pride. "She trains to honor him." Mallory's eyes sparkled with a rare warmth. "And to write her own story." The weight of history seemed to fill the room, not as a burden, but as a mantle passed from one generation to the next. Riker closed the journal slowly, aware that a turning point had been reached. "No more tests," he declared softly. "Only the path forward." The girl stood, her posture steady and sure. There was no need for words. Her presence said it all. She was no longer simply a student. She was a living testament, a silent witness. The dojo had finally settled into a calm stillness, as if it had exhaled after the tension earlier. The scattered echoes of footsteps and whispered breaths had faded into silence, leaving only the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Riker watched the girl sitting cross-legged on the mat, her posture straight yet relaxed, eyes steady and thoughtful. She wasn't merely resting. She was absorbing the space, attuned to every subtle shift in the room. It was as if the world itself had slowed down for her. He stepped forward carefully, mindful not to disturb the fragile bubble of respect that had formed around her. "There's a lesson many never learn," he said quietly, his voice low but steady. "It's not about striking first or fighting harder. It's about stillness." The girl's gaze lifted to meet his, a faint flicker of curiosity shining through the quiet resolve in her eyes. "Stillness is about what you do when the world demands action, but the best response is to wait," Riker explained. "When patience becomes your weapon, and control is your shield." She nodded slowly, fingers tightening gently around the black belt lying across her lap. "My father said the same," she murmured. "True strength isn't in moving first, but in knowing when not to move." The words lingered between them like a sacred truth. Riker thought of the many students he'd trained, some hungry for glory, rushing into fights without purpose, blinded by noise and impulse. But she was different. The legacy she carried was not just about mastering technique, but embracing wisdom, restraint, and presence. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered through the windows, painting shifting patterns of light and shadow on the mats. A soft breeze rustled the leaves outside, lending the room a quiet serenity that felt less like a training hall and more like a sanctuary. Riker moved to the wooden rack and pulled down a weathered training sword, its surface scarred but cared for. "Let me show you something," he said gently. He demonstrated slow, deliberate movements, a silent dance of balance, control, and precision. "This isn't about speed or strength. It's about listening. To yourself, to your opponent, to the moment." The girl watched intently, absorbing every detail. Then, with a quiet determination, she took the sword and mirrored his motions. Her movements began tentative but soon flowed with growing confidence and grace, each gesture embodying discipline and focus. Riker smiled softly. "You carry more than skill, young one. You carry a spirit that can't be taught, only inherited, nurtured, and lived." She lowered the sword, eyes steady and clear. "I'm ready to learn." In that quiet, simple statement, Riker saw not just a student, but the living continuation of a legacy forged in silence, discipline, and unwavering presence. The days passed quietly but steadily. Each morning before dawn, the girl arrived at the dojo, greeted by the faint smell of worn mats and the stillness that only emptiness can bring. The early light filtered softly through the windows, casting long shadows that stretched like silent sentinels across the floor. She moved through the drills with a deliberate grace, each punch, block, and stance executed with the calm precision of someone who had been taught to move well before stepping onto any mat. Riker watched closely, impressed by the fluidity of her movements, The way her body remembered techniques not formally taught in the classes. It wasn't just physical skill. There was a mental discipline at work, an unspoken knowledge, a deep patience that set her apart from most students he had trained over his long career. She never rushed, never sought approval. She simply moved, steady and true. One late afternoon, as the sun sank low behind the distant hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Riker found himself standing beside her during a brief pause. "You carry a heavy past," he said quietly, careful not to startle her. She glanced up, her eyes reflective, carrying stories they did not speak aloud. "But every day you come here, you're fighting battles that no one sees," he added softly. She nodded. "The hardest battles aren't the ones fought with fists," she said. "They're the ones fought in silence, in grief, in memory, in moments no one watches." Riker felt the weight of those words settle between them. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Those battles require strength, too. Strength that's often invisible." Training continued in those weeks, peeling back layers of resilience and vulnerability alike. Riker saw how her body instinctively remembered moves no one had taught her, marks of a legacy carved deep into muscle and mind. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, she stood by the window, gazing out as twilight faded into night. Riker approached quietly. "You're not alone," he said. "This dojo, these people, they're here for you." She nodded, a fragile trust beginning to take root in her eyes. The path ahead was daunting, but in the quiet shared between them, Riker knew one thing for certain. True resilience isn't just physical. It's the courage to face the unseen battles within. The following weeks wove into a tapestry of quiet growth. The dojo, once a place of casual training and youthful bravado, now carried an undercurrent of reverence. Every session with the girl was a lesson in humility, not just for her, but for everyone who bore witness. Her movements remained precise, unhurried. Each step, each breath was deliberate, grounded in a discipline that seemed less about winning fights and more about honoring something unseen. Riker noticed how the other students began to watch her differently. The teenage boys who once scoffed now kept their distance, eyes respectful yet curious. The instructors who had doubted her presence now sought her advice, quietly acknowledging the weight she carried without ever needing to say it aloud. One evening, as the setting sun cast golden light through the dojo windows, Riker found himself sitting beside the girl during a rare break. The black belt lay folded between them, a silent emblem of legacy and loss. "You carry your father's spirit," Riker said gently, "but you're becoming your own person." She looked at him, eyes steady. "I want to be more than just his shadow," she whispered. "I want to live in the light he fought for." The words struck Riker deeply. He thought of the sacrifices made behind closed doors, the invisible battles fought by those who serve and those left waiting. "Valor isn't just in the battlefield," he replied softly. "It's in the everyday choices to keep moving forward, to stand even when the world expects you to fall." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I've learned that silence can be a shield and a sword." He nodded, recognizing the wisdom far beyond her years. As dusk deepened, the dojo seemed to breathe alongside them, a living testament to resilience, legacy, and quiet strength. Riker rose, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder. "You carry more than a name. You carry a story that deserves to be told." She smiled faintly, a quiet promise in her gaze. And in that moment, the girl was no longer just the daughter of a legend. She was a warrior in her own right, ready to face whatever battles lay ahead. That evening, the dojo was charged with an energy unlike any before. Whispers had spread of the girl's quiet skill and the heavy legacy she carried. A legacy not just told in stories, but lived in every controlled movement she made. It had stirred curiosity and a touch of competitive spirit among the students. The blue belt who had sparred with her earlier, once brash and dismissive, now approached with a different demeanor. His confident smirk was gone, replaced by a hesitant respect and an eagerness to test himself against her again, to understand what lay beneath the quiet discipline. Riker stood nearby, arms folded, watching closely as the two faced each other on the mat. The usual clamor of practice had given way to a hush. This was no ordinary sparring match. It was a moment saturated with history, expectation, and the silent weight of respect from all present. The boy moved first, launching a quick jab, a probing strike meant to gauge her reflexes. But she didn't react the way most would expect. Instead, with a subtle shift of weight and a pivot as smooth as a tactician's maneuver, she sidestepped. Her movements were measured, precise, never forced, never aggressive, flowing around him like water moving effortlessly around a rock. Each of her motions communicated control and calm, an unyielding presence that neither invited conflict nor surrendered ground. The boy's strikes grew more hurried, his frustration bubbling beneath the surface as he tried to break through her defenses. But she absorbed, redirected, and neutralized his attacks without a flicker of strain or imbalance. Riker noticed her steady breath, the unwavering focus in her eyes, signs of a warrior tempered not just by physical training, but by deep emotional resolve. After several minutes, the boy's energy waned. He faltered, his exhaustion evident. Lowering his gaze, he bowed deeply, a gesture of tradition and, more importantly, genuine acknowledgement. A soft but growing applause broke the silence, filling the room with a quiet reverence. The girl offered a small, polite nod, serene and resolute. Riker stepped forward, voice calm but weighted. "This isn't about dominance," he said. "It's about presence, about understanding yourself so completely that you never strike without purpose." The boy looked up, eyes wide with a new respect. "I get it now," he admitted. "There's so much more to this than I realized." The girl met his gaze steadily. "And that," she said quietly, "is just the beginning." The weeks slipped by with a rhythm all their own. The dojo remained a sanctuary of quiet discipline, where every movement and breath seemed measured by a higher standard. Riker had watched the girl grow stronger, more confident, yet there was something deeper that had only recently caught his attention. One afternoon, as he helped her adjust her GI after a particularly demanding session, his fingers brushed lightly against the fabric at the nape of her neck. A sudden, almost instinctive pause came over him. There, partially hidden beneath the strands of her dark hair, was a faded tattoo, subtle and worn, but unmistakable. A black trident. The edges were softened with age, ink faded, but the symbol was clear. It was a mark Riker knew well. Not something seen on dojo mats or tournament banners, but a rare insignia, the emblem of DevGru, the Navy's most elite special operations unit. His breath hitched. He looked up slowly, eyes locking with hers. In that moment, the girl's quiet demeanor deepened into something more profound. There was a steel beneath the calm, a reservoir of strength forged in places few ever witnessed. "You carry more than just a legacy," Riker said softly, voice thick with respect. "That tattoo, it's not for decoration. It's a history few are privileged to hold." The girl met his gaze evenly, without hesitation or shame. "It was my father's," she said simply, as if passing on a sacred truth. "He told me it was a reminder that strength isn't just about power. It's about endurance, about carrying the weight when no one is watching." Riker nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. That kind of strength isn't taught in a dojo. It's lived in every silent moment and every hard choice. She smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement of the path she walked. The room seemed to hold its breath, the unspoken truth settling like a mantle upon everyone present. She wasn't just a girl with a black belt. She was the daughter of a warrior who had walked a path few could follow, and she was ready to carry that path forward. The dojo doors creaked open softly, letting in a sliver of fading evening light. The girl stood taller, her presence undeniable, the hidden mark on her neck speaking volumes without a single word. No further explanation was needed. Her story had just begun. The dojo had emptied out, the last students slipping away into the cool evening air. The overhead lights dimmed slightly, casting long, soft shadows across the worn mats. The faint scent of sweat and wood polish lingered, memories of countless hours spent training, struggling, growing. On the mat, the girl stood alone, a solitary figure framed by fading lights streaming through the windows. Her black belt, wrapped carefully around her waist, felt heavier than the fabric alone could explain. It was more than a symbol of skill. It was the legacy of a man who had taught her much more than martial arts. Riker leaned against the wall in the corner, watching quietly. He saw in her the slow unfolding of something rare, a quiet strength forged not just in technique, but in endurance, humility, and unyielding presence. No applause would come, no cheers or grand declarations. This was not a story told with noise, but with steady, unshakable truth. She ran her fingers gently along the worn fabric of the belt, as if tracing invisible lines back to her father. Her eyes closed briefly, drawing in a breath deep and steady, a breath taught to her long ago, one that carried calm through storms. When she opened her eyes, they shone with clarity and resolve. Riker stepped forward, his voice low and steady. This journey, it's not about glory. She nodded, meeting his gaze without flinching. It's about carrying the quiet weight of what came before and walking forward with honor. She smiled softly, a serene acceptance of a path few could understand. The room held its silence, a reverence not for the girl alone, but for the invisible battles, the sacrifices, and the untold stories that shaped her. No words were needed. The legacy was alive, not in loud fanfare, but in steady, silent steps. And as the last light faded from the dojo, Riker knew the truth. She was ready to carry the weight of the past and to forge her own future. The soft light of early morning filtered through the dojo's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams, suspended in the stillness of dawn. It was quiet, almost reverent, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting. The girl arrived with the dawn as she always did, her footsteps measured, steady, carrying with them a calm presence that seemed to soften the sharp edges of the space. Her black belt lay folded carefully in her hands, a silent emblem of the legacy she carried and the journey she was on. Riker was already there, preparing the training area with practiced precision. The clink of wooden staffs and the soft rustle of mats greeted her arrival. Their eyes met briefly, a nod passed between them, more than a greeting, a mutual understanding of the work ahead. Today, Riker began, voice low but steady, we focus on awareness. Not just of your opponent's movements, but of your own. The best fighters are masters of themselves long before a fight begins. She listened attentively, her gaze unwavering, absorbing every word. He gestured toward the walls lined with mirrors. Look closely. Watch yourself. Notice every detail, the tension in your shoulders, the rhythm of your breath, the way your eyes track movement. Fighting isn't just physical. It starts in the mind, in the quiet space where control and patience reside. Stepping forward, she faced the mirrors. Her reflection fractured into many images, each one a mirror of calm determination. She studied herself as if seeing a stranger, noting the subtle balance of strength and grace within. Riker led her through a sequence of exercises, slow, deliberate movements punctuated by precise, sudden strikes. Each required a fusion of mental focus and physical control, an acute awareness of timing, distance, and intention. As the session continued, other students quietly entered, drawn by the unmistakable aura she carried. They gathered on the sidelines, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by curiosity and growing respect. At one point, a young man stepped forward hesitantly. How do you remain so calm, even when pressure mounts? She paused, searching for the right words, then replied simply, calmness is a choice. It comes from knowing yourself well enough not to be ruled by fear. The room fell into silence, the truth in her words resonating deeper than any lesson taught through force. Riker smiled softly, recognizing the transformation unfolding, not just in her, but in all who bore witness. This was more than training. She was becoming a quiet leader, a beacon of strength, presence, and resilience. The atmosphere in the dojo was thick with anticipation as news spread of the upcoming regional tournament, a gathering where fighters from nearby towns and cities would converge to test their skills, earn recognition, and claim trophies. Whispers had begun to circulate about the quiet girl with the black belt, her name spoken in tones of disbelief and cautious respect. Many had underestimated her before, but now, curiosity replaced skepticism. Riker observed her in the dimly lit locker room, methodical and calm as she laced her gloves. The black belt around her waist gleamed subtly beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, a silent emblem of countless hours of dedication and discipline. There was no nervousness, No hesitation. Only a steady, focused presence. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Riker said softly, his voice firm yet compassionate. This isn't about trophies or accolades. She met his gaze, her eyes clear, resolute, and unwavering. I know, she replied quietly. It's about facing myself, confronting the doubts, the fears. That's the real challenge. Their journey had never been about public approval. It was an internal battle, waged day after day in the quiet moments between training and reflection. And today was another step along that path. The gymnasium buzzed with energy as the tournament began. The stands filled quickly, voices rising and falling like waves. Competitors warmed up in corners, their eyes sharp, muscles coiled with tension and fire. Her first opponent was larger, more imposing, and loud, accustomed to commanding attention. The crowd's murmur shifted to low bets on an easy victory. But from the first bell, the girl's calm precision unsettled him. She moved deliberately, never reckless, her body reading the space between them like a seasoned tactician. Every block was calculated. Every counterattack was a study in timing and restraint. The crowd grew hushed, eyes locked on her, captivated by the graceful dismantling of her opponent's bravado. When the match concluded, she offered a respectful nod. The opponent, though humbled, returned the gesture with a reluctant smile, an unspoken acknowledgement of her skill. Riker stood quietly at the edge of the mat, pride swelling beneath his calm exterior. This was more than a victory, it was a statement. A quiet declaration that she was no longer just the daughter of a legend. She was carving her own legacy. The days after the tournament passed quietly, but the atmosphere within the dojo shifted noticeably. The girl moved through her training with a newfound confidence. But beneath the surface, a heavier weight had settled. The burden of expectations and unanswered questions about her past, her father, and the path she was slowly forging for herself. One late evening, long after the others had left, Riker found her sitting alone by the dojo's small, sacred shrine. It was a simple setup, a worn wooden altar holding framed photographs, dog tags, and weathered journals. The air smelled faintly of incense and old paper. She traced a gentle finger over a faded photograph of a man in uniform, his face proud, yet marked by the passage of time and the cost of service. You carry his story with you, Riker said softly, settling down beside her. She nodded, eyes distant but thoughtful. There's so much more than what people see, she whispered. The sacrifices, the losses, they don't show up in tournaments or medals, but they shape who we become. They live in the silence between moments. Riker reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an old, folded letter, yellowed, creased, and worn from years of safekeeping. He left this for you. I kept it safe. Her eyes widened, breath catching as she unfolded the carefully penned words. The letter was filled with wisdom, love, and a promise, a silent pledge of strength that transcended distance and time. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she folded the letter with deliberate care and pressed it close to her heart, drawing quiet comfort from the weight of those words. You're not alone in this, Riker said gently, voice steady yet firm. His legacy lives through you. But remember, so does your own path. One you must choose and walk with your own strength. The dojo held its breath, as if bearing witness to that intimate moment of connection and healing. She looked up, a flicker of resolve igniting within her eyes, a fierce, quiet determination. I'm ready, she said softly but firmly, ready to face whatever comes next. In that moment, the unspoken truth was made clear. Her strength was not only inherited, it was consciously chosen. A legacy reborn in her own image. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the tall windows of the dojo, spilling a gentle golden glow across the polished wooden floor. The room was quiet, holding a peaceful stillness that seemed to breathe with the slow rhythm of morning. The girl stood alone in the center of the mat, the black belt tied securely around her waist, a symbol heavy with meaning, woven from threads of legacy, sacrifice, and unwavering resolve. Riker entered silently, his footsteps muffled by the mats. He approached her with a nod of respect, eyes reflecting the pride and quiet admiration he had nurtured since their first meeting. This is your moment, he said simply, his voice steady yet filled with significance. She drew in a deep breath, grounding herself in the present while the memories of the past flickered through her mind like a quiet film. The image of her father, strong, disciplined, and silent, was there, alongside mentors and comrades who had shaped her without fanfare. The sacrifices made, the battles fought in silence, and the lessons learned in the shadows weighed on her, but also strengthened her. Yet now, the path ahead belonged solely to her. This was no longer a story told in whispers or marked by others' expectations. This was her story, her fight, her voice. The dojo, once merely a place for physical training, had transformed into a sanctuary of rebirth, a place where resilience, humility, and quiet strength were forged anew. Each breath she took filled her with a calm determination that radiated outward, touching the very air around her. With steady grace, she began to move, each step fluid, every motion precise and intentional. Her body told the story of countless hours of discipline, her spirit illuminated by the promise of what was yet to come. There was no rush, no need for grand gestures, only the simple power of presence. Outside, the world waited, no longer a place of judgment or doubt, but one ready to witness the emergence of a new force, a warrior reborn not through noise, but through silent dignity. Though her journey was far from over, in this new dawn, she stood unshaken and whole. Her legacy was alive, her spirit unbreakable. She had become more than anyone expected, a beacon of strength and hope. A new chapter had begun. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.